So I think the question that you said that parents have, oh my goodness, I wasn't securely attached. I have this history. Am I doomed? Am I fated to repeat? Am I fated to transmit this to my child, unless, I have 5 years of psychotherapy or something like that? Now, I'm a huge fan of psychotherapy, but our answer is that much as that potential to heal is wired in, the potential for secure attachment is wired into us.
Attachment patterns shape the way that we connect, communicate, and heal. But what if the way we think about attachment isn't telling the full story? In this episode, I'm joined by AEDP developer Dr. Diana Fosha and AEDP Institute faculty member and psychotherapist Karen Pando-Mars. And we're going to explore how attachment-informed therapy can help break cycles of trauma and foster deeper, more secure relationships. Their new book, Tailoring Treatment and Attachment Patterns, Healing Trauma in Relationships, blends attachment theory, AEDP methodologies, and trauma recovery to provide a roadmap for healing. Together, we talk about how you can deepen your emotional awareness, why repair is at the heart of secure attachment, and what research reveals about overcoming attachment ruptures. But we also talk about the important parallels between healing trauma in a therapy treatment and parenting a child in a way that supports healthy emotional development. Because they may have different aims, but the strategies actually look very similar. So we are going to offer parents or therapists or anyone who's ready to break free from insecure attachment patterns some practical tools and research-backed insights that we can use to strengthen our relationships, break free from old cycles that aren't serving us, and move towards greater security and connection. Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Bren, a clinical psychologist and mom of two. In this podcast, I've taken all of my clinical experience, current research on brain science and child psychology, and the insights I've gained on my own parenting journey, and distilled everything down into easy to understand and actionable parenting insights, so you can tune out the noise and tune into your own authentic parenting voice with confidence and calm. This is Securely Attached. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of the Securely Attached podcast. Today, we have two just experts in their fields. We have Karen Pando-Mars and Dr. Diana Fosha, and they are here to talk to us about AEDP, which is Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy. And we'll get into all the letters and everything. But welcome. Thank you both so much for being here.
Very happy. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it's exciting to be in conversation.
Yeah, so I would love to just start off our conversation with you, orienting our listeners to kind of how you guys found each other to work on this book that you have and, your relationship and the work that you guys do before we get into all the good stuff, AEDP stuff.
I'll start and then we can just see, but I will say that I was drawn to a flyer that I received of a workshop that Diana was offering in Marin County. And it was about AEDP, and basically went to the workshop, signed up for the immersion course, and got into consultation immediately after, and fell in love with AEDP. It felt like everything that I had studied was experiential and focusing. And in the 90s, there was so much about attachment literature and neuroscience that I graduated prior to the decade of the 90s. And so when I met Diana and AEDP, there was just this incredible model that held it all. And so I came with a lot of experience experientially, but with AEDP, I really got the attachment, the brain science, and most importantly, the transformational aspect of the work.
That's amazing.
So I dove in, and along the way became faculty, and along that way, in teaching about attachment, the question, what do you do with people if different styles came up? And so I developed the centerpiece of the book, the grids, started talking to Diana about that. She encouraged me to write an article and then later the book. And we've been working on this together, talking it over for 10, 13 years, something like that. It's been a long time.
Wow. God, it must feel so good to have it come, like, be like out in the world now and like get to really see it materialize.
Yes.
Yeah, it's sort of amazing.
Yeah.
It's sort of amazing. I mean, sort of as the book sort of was officially released, we sort of retraced our history just to see sort of how long has it been and how long have we been working together and what respects and how and so on and so forth. So, I mean, we share AEDP, we share, teaching it and working within it, we share the model. And very specifically, working on these set of ideas, which started out as a paper or started out as a grid on a bunch of pieces of paper that Karen was taking notes on, and grew into a paper. And then the paper became, after a very long gestation period, we have to say, became a book. And all that sort of preceded by AEDP, which provides the framework and the structure, and it's sort of the model assumes it. So we sort of go into it in the book.
Yeah. And you, Diana, you are the creator of AEDP.
I am.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, to sort of tell the origin story briefly, I had been trained in psychodynamic, psychoanalytic work, which I think of as the sort of Greek and Latin. They provide this kind of fundamental structure. Whether you use them, whether you use Latin or ancient Greek, probably you don't, but it's there, sort of like in the structure. So I think that psychoanalytic training was just very, very crucial. At the same time, I was very interested in effectiveness. I was very interested in aliveness. There was a certain particular thread. And I became interested in things that sort of enhanced the effectiveness of the therapy, its speed, duration, etc. Did some work in short-term dynamic psychotherapy, and became exposed to a model, which I learned, which was in some ways rather non-congruent with my nature, ISTDP. It was very confrontational and very aggressive, though I grew some muscles in the course of learning it. But what really, really drew me to it was the nature of the transformational phenomena, that there were actual experience of deep dropping down into emotion and breakthrough and real transformation happening quickly, not at the end of 5 years or gradually or slowly, which was incredibly compelling and interesting and moving to me, number one, so the attraction. But number two, it also became clear to me that there wasn't a theory to explain. ISTDP had old-fashioned drive theory, which has nothing to do with transformational phenomena, with quantum leaps or anything like that. So those two things, my interest in phenomenology and describing transformation, but also not thinking that therapy is about this kind of battle or confrontation, but rather much more being with, sort of allowed me to bring in my relational, developmental, psychoanalytically oriented approach to relationship based on attunement and mother-child interaction. So that was one big shift to the developmental and to attachment. And the other was just this fascination that I have with transformational theory. So that's really the roots.
Mm-hmm. So can we talk a little bit about what AEDP is? Because I know we have a lot of therapists that listen to this podcast, but we also have a lot of parents. And I know the parents that listen to this podcast they're really psychologically savvy parents. And I think they might really enjoy like kind of understanding obviously this podcast is called Securely Attached. We talk about attachment a lot. So I would love to kind of understand like how attachment overlaps and informs this treatment modality, and how it might be appealing to parents who either to seek it out as a treatment modality for themselves or their parent-child relationships, but also really to think about how can I pull some of these things and inform my parenting a little bit as well. So yeah, that was a lot, but maybe just start with like, what is AEDP?
Maybe I'll do sort of like just a brief account and then turn it to Karen to add, Karen, whatever you want, but specifically or more particularly the attachment aspect.
Sure.
But I guess to try to capture it in a nutshell, because it's a rather complex model. It's a model that when people see our videotapes, and we work from videotapes and we teach from videotapes, when people see our videotapes, they feel very natural. And one of our colleagues called it deceptively simple, just because it has this kind of resonance that, sort of hits a certain kind of authenticity in the person. The theory underneath it, it's more complex. But a couple of things that I just want to highlight. One is that we're not psychopathology oriented, but we're healing oriented. We understand things from the point of view, including attachment difficulties, not just the secure attachment, as adaptation, as best efforts, as really evidence of the individual's strivings to heal and to repair and to do their very best. So we're constantly leaning into, what's adaptive here? What's transformative? What's a little glimmer? Maybe there's a lot of stuff that's wrong, but what's the little glimmer of what's right? So I think that, and the kind of stance, the therapeutic stance, which is very much attachment informed. And it's about being with, being affirmative, being loving. Gone is the neutrality of, of long ago. But it's not just not neutral, it's actively affirmative and authentic at the same time. It has to be. And the last piece that I will say is that our goal is to sort of like help people feel safe enough that they can drop down into their emotions with us, emotions associated with their attachment trauma, with their big T trauma, with difficulties they've had in their lives that they haven't been able to deal with by themselves. But with support and with accompaniment and sort of with dyadic relationship, those emotions can be processed and taken to a good place, which we then really, really then subsequently work with. And that's the transformational piece. So you actually got like all four aspects in, I hope, less than 3 minutes. So
Yeah, that was great. And if I'm going to like synthesize it, I'm hearing there is this belief that the healing capacity is in you always, right? I'm not assuming that you are sick and I have to heal you. It's correct. You are in pain and maybe suffering, and your ability to heal is present here too.
Exactly.
So the second thing I'm hearing is that the attunement of the therapist to the client is the driver of most of the kind of where things go and what is like kind of informing the work. And then let me see if I can remember everything you said, because it was good. So good. Just like summary. You're talking about, I know there's maybe another piece I'm missing, but at the end I heard you say, like, once the client is able to really get safe enough to feel that safety and go to these painful places, then there's this other layer to the work where you're going to like look at that. Like, I think you call it meta processing, right? Where you're looking at, okay, something just happened here. How do we understand that? How did that feel for you? And then there's a whole piece of work that comes from that element.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
No, remarkably. I think just to sort of specify it a little bit more, just differentiating between the work, with the core emotions, which are painful, and helping people heal those or, take them to a better place. And then when they do get to a better place, really working with a positive experience and amplifying that. So just sort of being a little more granular about those two aspects. But I think you did an incredible job. And I really want to be quiet now and just give the baton to Karen.
That's great. So one of the things that I was just listening to Diana say that I think is so much a part of AEDP is that we're not neutral, that we're engaging from a place of being affirming and loving and caring. And I just think that is so central, because part of what that means is that when people are talking, we're actually leaning into any moments of secure functioning that show up. A willingness to look, a willingness to say, I've never told anyone this before, but I feel like I need to say this now, or I was just supervising, witnessing someone's tape, and they were giving both a painful, difficult place and a positive place the same weight. And I was thinking, no, what we actually want to do is we want to help people choose to kind of, if you can set this aside for now and we can really open into this place that feels nutritive, let's be with that and see what develops. So with not having a blank face, we also lean into directions that we pretty much have maps that orient us to what's a good direction to go towards experience, towards body-based emotions, towards relational connection.
So is the idea there to sort of relationally and through the relationship reinforce placing attention on and potentially like wiring our connections to these more maybe pro-adaptive or securely driven interactions with another human?
Yes, I would say so. And, as I'm listening to you, I'm noticing that part of what we talk about in AEDP is a word called transformance, which Diana coined, which tends to be the opposite of resistance. And so when we see manifestations of interest, growth, new development, it's like our attachment systems are wired in, but because of wounding, they often get shut down or pushed away or not trusted. And so what we're trying to do is set up conditions for that wired in place to kind of self-right so that people can get reacquainted with, oh, maybe I can ask for help. Oh, maybe I can admit that I'm nervous or afraid or angry or sad or happy. So part of what we talk a lot about in our book is setting the conditions for this security and safety so that we can actually allow the attachment system that's innate, the seeking system that Panksepp talked about, the exploratory system that Bowlby talked about, that those are innate drives that we can facilitate them arising by how we are with our patients, with our clients.
That makes so much sense. I really love that idea. Like, And I know like, and I just can't help but notice the parallels between, and this is true for lots of like good therapy, but like that dynamic between a therapist and a client when it is attachment oriented or informed, like there's so many good parallels to parenting. Like, cause it's not as a parent, you are not your child's therapist, but you are their source of like writing the attachment blueprint. And so even if you have an attachment blueprint that needs to be, made more secure, like you got editing to do to get to that secure place. Because I have so many parents that ask me, like, I don't have a history of secure attachment relationships. And I'm so terrified that I'm going to have just by default, my kid's going to be insecurely attached too. And, I think we have enough understanding that there are things that we can really do to prevent transmitting that. And obviously doing this kind of therapeutic work for yourself as an adult so that you can become more healed and have different attachment strategies and like allow that to flow into your parenting, like that's super important. But just like as a general parent being like, oh, what does it actually look like to be attuned to my kid? And like, why does it help? Like this feels so like, yeah, we're talking about therapy, but like parents can do this too in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Like it seems very transferable.
Mm-hmm. And I want to add something because I think you're talking about something really, really important, that there's a tendency in the field that has also gotten transmitted to the general public, but it's also, our sort of being so magnetically drawn to what is wrong, Mm-hmm. So I think the question that you said that parents have, oh my goodness, I wasn't securely attached. I have this history. Am I doomed? Am I fated to repeat? Mm-hmm. Am I fated to transmit this to my child, unless, I have 5 years of psychotherapy or something like that. Now, I'm a huge fan of psychotherapy, but our answer is that, much as that potential to heal is wired in, just like Karen was saying, the potential for secure attachment is wired into us. Mm-hmm. And is always present, and we are not sort of like slaves to our histories. Side by side with that, there's this potential so that, being able to sort of see that capacity to give love or to attune or to repair or to, sort of hold difficulty without punishing the child or being punitive or abusive, is wired in. In therapy, we want to celebrate it every time we see it. Mm-hmm. That when we see these glimmers of transformance, when we see these glimmers, of risk-taking or of connection, we want to like really heighten and bring attention to them, and I think there's also ways in which I think parents can attune to all the things they're doing right. Mm-hmm. Regardless of their histories. So, without minimizing the other side of it, which is that, of course, they were affected by how we grew up. But there's much more of an interplay between the two.
Yeah. I think that's so helpful to remember. Like, I think a huge myth that we always often try to bust on this podcast is that attachment is this like fixed, locked in thing. But reality, even the idea of like an attachment style isn't really an accurate way of describing. It's just kind of a shorthand that's gotten adapted by people. But like, we don't have one attachment style, or we are not a attachment style. Like we have many, many, many relationships. And in each relationship, we show up in different ways, sometimes secure, sometimes less so. And we can have these blueprints that got written early on that can sort of prime us to bring things with us that can make us have patterns of showing up in relationships. And that's, I think, where things like AEDP would be really helpful in helping people go back to that early blueprint and start to rewrite it a little bit. But like, if you are in a relationship with someone where they make you feel genuinely seen and safe, you're probably going to show up relatively secure, even if you have a pattern of less secure relating. And I'm just curious your guys' thoughts on that too, and how that ties into the work that you do when you're using AEDP professionally.
I mean, I love what you're saying, because in the book, I talk about shifting away from styles towards patterns for that very reason that we, in the early studies, it was clear that children have different patterns that show up with different caregivers. And we draw on that in AEDP, in that we want to be a container and a place that sets conditions for that safe haven, if you will, and to create a safe base, which is what parents are doing for their kids, just to draw that parallel. And one of the pieces about patterns that's really been important to me is breaking down, like, the configuration of each pattern has all these different components. And as psychotherapists, it gives us different entry points to pay attention to. Like when someone's been really wounded and hurt and had their attachment needs rejected or minimized, that can be very avoidant producing, right? And so what we're trying to do in our work is bring acceptance and kindness and care, so that if attachment needs are in the room, they can be safe to explore and to feel and to be with. There was something I wanted to get back to about with parents. Oh, I know it had to do with like what's something that we work with in therapy, but also parents can address. Mm-hmm. And one of it is really meeting where the person is at, whether it's our client or our kid. That's so often when kids or clients are really distressed, sometimes the desire to help actually overrides meeting the distress with like, oh my gosh, you're so upset right now. Oh my gosh, this is so important and feels so hard. Like, to really meet the distress. Because in a lot of the early interactive studies, what was shown is that, baby cries, mom's overwhelmed, mom smiles to make the baby happy, but misses the fact that the baby's sad and pulling away. Mom leans in, trying to help, but baby draws back, too much space. And so really, that tells us so much about the importance of matching. And you can see in BB studies that when mothers are able to, or caregivers really, are able to recognize the baby's distress and, maybe sober their face if baby's crying, be still for a minute and actually connect with what's going on, baby can settle. And then maybe might reach back out and mom can reach out. And it's so subtle, but it teaches us so much about attunement.
Yes.
So there's that piece.
Yeah, that makes me too think of like, obviously, if you are practicing AEDP as a therapist, you really have to be so tuned in, not just to your client, but to your own self, because you're constantly self-regulating in order to be able to attune, because we are two-way people. You know what I mean? There's this two-way feedback, biofeedback happening. Like, we feel the person in our presence. We feel their feelings just as much as we can like cognitively identify or whatever, right? And same with parents, right? To be a parent is a masterclass in having to learn to self-regulate, to be able to attune. Because like what you're describing, like if a baby's crying and the mom leans in or smiles when the baby needs to like just be seen, the reason that she's probably leaning in is because she's having her own like panic, like, I can't handle this, I got to turn this off, or fear, or, distress or overstimulation, right? Like, oh my gosh, how many times, like as a parent of a older kid, like when they're losing it and totally dysregulated, that load of sensory input I'm receiving as the parent, not just the parent that wants to help the kid and feels worried about them or stressed about them, but just as the human being receiving all of this screaming and kicking and whatever, like I'm getting flooded because it's activating to be in the presence of such intense affect and sometimes physicality, right? And so there's so many things I have to do at the same time, right? In order to attune to my kid, I have to tolerate what they're giving to me. I have to regulate my own nervous system so that I can tap into my capacity to attune. And then I have to be sort of like tracking what I'm tuning into and then deciding how to meet that. That's a lot. But it, like you say, like you watch it on a tape and you're like, oh, that seems so natural. But like all the mechanisms that have to be happening simultaneously to really get it right, it's a lot.
But you know what I want to add to that is that we don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is very merciful, both as therapists and as parents. And everything you named, sort of because of that, we're not going to always get it right. We're not going to always be able to attune to the kid who's freaking out while our nervous system is overloaded. There might be those times when you lean in either with distraction or games or anger, whatever, non-optimal responses in the moment, which we all have. But those can be repaired.
Yes.
I think that there are lapses, and they don't feel good. But I think the repair, this is also what we've learned from research and really from our therapeutic experience, is that making the repair, owning the lapse, apologizing for oneself, when the dust settles, taking responsibility, being interested in the other person's experience, doing, whatever it takes, to sort of set that repair in motion, not expecting it to happen like this just because I apologize, it's going to be now okay. It'll take the time that it'll take. To give just a couple of examples, that's the process. That's what makes secure attachment. It's so nice when we get everything right and everything sort of like works nicely and moves along. But we've learned that secure attachment really results from, and resilience from, the capacity to get through those hard times that don't always initially go perfectly.
Yeah. That's such an important and very, I hope, hopeful message and reminder, because it's like, I mean, I've seen different research cite different numbers, but like I've definitely read studies where they're like maternal attunement, like 54% of the time, as little as 54% of the time, was still predictive of a secure attachment relationship. Like we don't have to, we're not supposed to get it right all the time. And we really don't have to. We just, if attunement is your North Star, you're going to keep coming back to it. And when you deviate from it, you notice and you come back to it. But like you're going to constantly be deviating from it. And it's the returning to it that I think is like far more important.
I mean, it's that showing, it's the care that comes from returning it to it and trying to get it right and trying to understand what's needed best for next time. I mean, we talk about tronic studies that say it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So it's even
amazing,
and it may, and
what the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is.
1/3 attunement, 1/3 disruption, 1/3 repair. So those moments you're describing are that, disruption, but it's that desire to come back, the desire to get it right, the desire to care about what made things so upsetting in the first place. All of that makes such a huge difference. And, clinically, I have to say, so many folks come in and repair is not on their radar that's possible. And that's just such an interesting marker of insecure attachment, is that repair piece often has been missing. And so I think maybe that's something that when we're working with folks, our intention to be there and to hear about what went badly or what went off or what didn't feel good or, what was missed. I had a client just recently, really have to tell me how I shortcut something that she was saying, and she really missed being able to feel her experience. And we took a whole session the next time, just really talking about what I missed, what she felt, and taking it so slow that it wasn't like, okay, you got it, thanks. Now I'll tell you the thing that I was trying to get to. It doesn't work like that. We just have to really, like Diana was saying, like really be interested in taking what it takes to get back on track.
Yeah. Is that sort of what you're describing, really staying with the processing of a rupture and not just moving on? Is that part of that meta processing element of AEDP? Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect?
I mean, I think I think those I would say are two different things, because one is we'll talk about, we work explicitly and experientially with the relational part of the work, so that we're really tuning in and engaging and being honest and authentic and judiciously self-disclosing, in service of the patient, but willing to name and be with what our experience is. Metaprocessing itself is about when there's shifts, when there's a change, when there's a completed emotion, when there's a new experience, really wanting to foster an understanding of what happens when you feel differently. What happens when you faced this memory that you always kept in the dark? What happens when you share this with me, another person? So we're really trying to look at what the effects of change is. And then there's what unfolds is oftentimes different transformational affects. Diana has noticed that in the process of exploring after core emotions that are more often described, sadness, anger, fear, those things, that when people have completed something, they might have a sense of mastery or pride, or there might be new realizations or enlivenment or feeling really moved and grateful. Like there's many aspects of going through changes and facing new things that kind of grow the self, grow the capacity. And so AEDP really tries to harness that and build on that, grow those potentials.
So you're really moving slowly in a good way. Like you're really willing to stay and can like review and like integrate. It's not like, I don't know, we move so quickly, okay, I said the thing, I did the thing, that felt good. Let's move on to this next. Like we're really saying, well, not so fast. Like but let's not move on just yet. Like how much are you modeling like that ability to just slow down and move all the way through it, including the like integration at the end of whatever it is?
If I can just, answer that, but piggyback on what Karen was saying about metaprocessing and sort of integrate our example about repair. However you get there, when you do repair, when calm has been restored, when you're back in the connection, the kid is back in your lap, or you're playing again, or with a patient, there is this sense, okay, I really do feel like you understand me, and now I understand something better. And right, that the repair has happened, to use that example. It's not just, oh, how great, but like, okay, so what is it like that we were able to sort of hang in there with the hard stuff, and here we are feeling closer and knowing each other better? What's that like? In other words, taking the repair, taking the good feelings that come from whatever it is, whether I feel good that I was able to hang in, I feel grateful to you because you see me, and etc. And really work with those in a way that sort of like expands this realm of these positive affects that are so connected with resilience, with intimacy, with immune health, with, everything in the book. We're broadening and building not just the resilience of having done it, but then so just to sort of unpack meta processing, it's meta in that, or it's meta therapeutic processing. We're processing what's therapeutic about what just happened. That's the meta part of it.
And even in like a parenting interaction, you're processing what was therapeutic or bonding or repairing about what just happened. And I would imagine too, because just on a developmental standpoint, you're also helping a child practice the skill of reflective functioning, right? You're saying not just what happened, but what was it? How do you feel about what happened? Or what was it like? Or what do you think I feel about what that happened? Or I'll tell you what I feel. So you're giving them this like exercise in reflective functioning.
Or I'm so proud of you for hanging in there with me when it was really hard. What's it like to know that I'm so proud of you? Right? Or, my God, you did such a good job. I was really upset there, but, you stayed with me too. Right? Something like that. Wow. What's it like that I'm so taken by it, or whatever?
It's like just you're taking it one step further.
Or two or three.
Or two or three. Yeah. That's amazing. I think that's very helpful.
So my rewind is like, okay, I oversplit the relational and the meta processing in the effort to kind of speak about that. Because I was thinking how important that full session afterwards with this person was, the idea that we actually could repair. And it totally went into the deeper work of how what was happening with me had never happened, in a particular significant relationship that was so missed. And so I just want to put
that makes sense, right?
Rather than the split.
For you to take all that time, to give, that's so caring, right? To say, I missed something and you had a feeling about that, and I'm going to give you a lot. Like it's a gift to give someone so much attention and time, right? On a miss that you caused them to feel pain about, right? Instead of, because I feel like we can be understandably out of our own protection for ourself and our defenses to be like, okay, I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry, and I would like for us to get over this quickly, please, because it's uncomfortable for me to have to hold my fault in this, right? And so, and as parents, of course, we do that all the time, right? Because we're going to mess up all the time, and we have guilt and we have shame, and we don't like hurting or messing up or causing our kids to be afraid of us because we yelled or whatever. But I think we're really out of a understandable wanting to get out of the discomfort of that shamey feeling. We want to help elicit the repair and then the move on for our own self. And so it's it's really a gift to be able to say, it's generous, to be like, I'm going to sit in this comfort for as long as you need. And then I'm here. I can tolerate all the feelings that I have about the feelings that you have, and I'm still with you. That's super tricky and really powerful. It just really highlights how relational this is. These are two-way. This is not a one-way thing. I think a lot of people think of therapy as I go in and it's a one-way relationship, right? I tell my therapist everything and they tell me nothing. And, it's not like a two-way therapy, but it is a two-way relationship. And there's a real human sitting in the room with you always. And then, well, with AI, who knows nowadays, but typically there's a real human sitting in this.
Thus far, there has been another human.
I know. Different episode.
Right.
But yeah, and same with being a parent. It is not a the parent-child relationship is also I don't want to say it's not asynchronous. That's not the right word, but it's not a equal two-way relationship either. It's not parent to parent. It's parent to child. And the parent is not asking the child to do for them what they need to do for the child. It is, not equal in that way, but it's not a one-way relationship. It's still a two-way. It's two human beings.
We talk in the book about the difference between relationships that are mutual and symmetric, and mutual and asymmetric.
Yeah.
So the attachment relationship is mutual. That's what we're talking about. It does go both ways, but it is asymmetric. There's a parent and a child. There's a therapist and a patient. That's where we have different responsibilities. We have different roles. We have different developmental levels. That's the asymmetry comes in, but it absolutely is mutual.
Mm-hmm. And that's I think where the magic happens.
Right. Exactly.
Are there any other pieces of this book that we haven't talked about that you feel like might be really helpful for therapists that are listening or parents to kind of be aware of that might be helpful for them?
I think the grids, Karen, you have to talk about the grids. We haven't talked about the grids at all. That's a sort of centerpiece of the book.
Thank you. What I was going to say is when we were talking earlier about like regulating and helping our patients or our children regulate, one of the things that, when I started looking at what happens differently with different patterns, how I would help someone regulate is going to be different. If I'm working with someone with an avoidant pattern, moving in really closely and saying like, can you feel me with you, might actually stir deactivating the attachment system, right? And so I really started looking at what's different. Like what is helpful for one can be dysregulating for the other. Somebody who's clamoring for help, if I offer help, is like, oh, finally, someone's here to help me, right? But someone else might say like, no, I really don't need your help. I'm just here because I need to figure out blah, blah. So there's different experiences that people come in with. And so I was asked in teaching what happens with folks with different styles. And that's when I, in writing the book, started shifting to patterns. And I looked at the configuration of each pattern in terms of affect regulation, arousal of the attachment system, self-other patterning. Do I go to others? Do I rely on myself? What are the caregiver hallmarks? The caregiver states of mind, what Mary Main studied in the adult attachment interview, and found that, parents who were dismissive of attachment needs tended to be, their children tended to be avoidant, to turn away. I better not need because that might disrupt our bond. Whereas when parents are inconsistent or self-occupied, the child might clamor and turn on the attachment system for that, if I can finally get your attention, and so, but the settling is different, difficult for folks sometimes with an ambivalent resistant pattern. So I created these grids, in conversation with Diana along the way, and then created a third grid. Well, there's three. One is, what are the patterns of the insecure attachment? What is the configuration of secure, so that we can notice what we're doing to set the conditions for secure functioning with our patients, but also what to notice when someone comes in and is, self-regulating, or somebody who's been seeking help from others comes in and says, I didn't make that 14th call last night. I actually contained and listened to a podcast, or I wrote in my journal, or I called a friend, and, or someone who's avoidant of relational, bids might say, I reached out, and instead of waiting for my partner to ask me a question, I shared something that I wanted them to know that was new for me. We really want to harness that. So in the secure grid, looking at what are signs of secure functioning that we can affirm and support and celebrate. And then the third grid is really looking at interventions that go alongside many of the different elements of each pattern. And the most, I think, contributory of the third grid is really looking at the therapist. What are common reactivities that we might have that come up with certain patterns? Like if someone's acting rejecting to us, it's common to feel rejected. That doesn't mean that I'm insecure necessarily. It might point to my own wounding and such, but it also can be that some things that happen in relationship trigger common reactivities. And there's also a part about what are the meta skills, what are the intentional sensitivities that we can bring to counter the hallmarks of the pattern of the state of mind or the caregiver hallmarks. So for avoidance being accepting, for ambivalence and resistance to maybe be firm, be directive. If someone is anxious and hyperactivating, if we can slow things down and be calm and firm and caring, but just help things to contain. And so that's a taste of some of the grids, but we've just really laid it out. And then there's transcripts and chapters that really take each pattern, the formation and the how to treat it. We go deeply with transcripts and examples and things.
I think that's so important because it takes this already really incredible model that's based on like attachment and attunement, and it creates a way to even more deeply individualize it to the person in the room with you, right? Because like I say this all the time with parenting, and like anyone who has more than one kid has figured this out pretty quickly. Like they're different. They're so different. The parenting strategies that work with one kid might not work with another. And you have to figure out like not just their attachment styles, but their regulatory systems, like their nervous systems, and how do they receive co-regulation from you, and what can they tolerate? And I imagine this is very similar of like, you're working with a patient, like understanding their attachment systems and then how that is different across different people can just elevate your ability to attune in a much more individualized way.
Yes, I think that very much, and I think that in those moments of reactivity or dysregulation for either the parent or the therapist, I think when we have a framework or an idea of what to aim for. So for instance, if I know, okay, when I get I'm getting dysregulated, maybe I can't think of 7 things at once, but I do know that if I take a moment to breathe or not react, that will help the situation. In the same way. So I have an aid, I have a sort of like an attachment assistance from a model or from a theory or from, a tool. And I think in the same way for therapists, when therapists sort of get triggered or their countertransference gets stirred up, but let's leave countertransference because that's a different thing. But just these common reactivities that Karen is talking about, the preoccupied patient who's talking nonstop and nothing, they want connection, but nothing is ever good enough. Plus, they don't stop enough to let the therapist get a word in edgewise. To just know that the goal, however I'm going to achieve it, the goal is to help the person sort of slow down, take a breath, and if anything, shift their focus internal rather than the grasping and the grabbing and so on. If I know that that's what I'm aiming for, it will help regulate me in the moment, right? And so for therapists to have ways to deal with their own reactivities as well as an understanding of these different patterns. Oh, that's what's happening. Physiology right now is in a shutdown state. So we have to deal with that first. That kind of thing, I think, is so helpful.
Yeah.
With these guidelines.
Yeah, it's like a playbook.
Oh, it's to be therapists or parents better.
Yeah.
You know,
no, it's super orienting, right? Like everyone feels a little better if they've got a cheat sheet. You know what I mean? Like
it's a cheat sheet. You know, the cheat sheet undoes aloneness, which is one of our big AEDP phrases. You know, we don't want the patient to be alone with their suffering or with their triumphs. You know, in the same way, the cheat sheet undoes our aloneness. You know, there's somebody who's helping me in this moment.
Yeah, because I know that as a therapist, there's a million times where I've felt helpless in a session because I don't know what I feel the disconnect, and I don't always, it's like I have to figure out what to do. And sometimes it can be perplexing. And so I think that's probably why most therapists keep getting more training, because it's like we've all felt that helpless moment and we want to we don't like it. And in parenting, oh my God, how many times have I felt helpless? Like I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, yeah, a cheat sheet helps. It really helps us feel not so alone and not so helpless in a moment. And then when we don't feel alone or helpless, we can lean in and allow that connection with the kid or the patient. It makes so much sense to me.
So great to hear. I love hearing your reflections when Diana and I are speaking, because it just feels, this conversation feels so natural in that way. Like I love hearing what you're taking from what's being said. Yeah. It's really great.
Thank you. That makes me feel so good, because that is really like always my goal when I get to, like, that's the best part about meeting people on this podcast is I get to just like get a glimpse into like the inner workings of the minds of people who are doing like such cool things. And it's, I don't know, I get to geek out. It's so fun.
It shows.
And I sort of like love about our collaboration is, you know, we call it nerding out, you know, about geeking out, that we have similar minds in that way and the back and forth. And it does feel very much like I agree with Karen. You know, this has been such a flowing conversation and so exciting. And when you said that makes you feel good, I was going to say, okay, if we were in AEDP session, now we would meta process. So what's it like that you've done this interview in such a way that we love it and you feel good? What's that like for you?
Yeah. No, I was thinking that's like, my brain was like, oh, this is like in real time, it's happening. And just to close that loop, I'll reflect on that because it makes me feel like I want to keep doing this. Like it makes me like, okay, we're on to something here. And like, these are connections that matter and like personally, but also for like the product that we're creating for other people to like, wow, this is so cool. And so thank you. And I really appreciate your time and your wisdom. And if people are like needing more and wanting to connect with the work that you do, and clearly I recommend getting this book, Tailoring Treatment and Attachment Patterns, Healing Trauma in Relationships. Definitely go get it. How can we connect people to your work?
Well, I think two things, just quickly. Just the AEDP website, you know, just has a ton of resources, trainings, articles, information, training. It is a website, you know, for therapists. It's not for the I mean, you know, people can come on it, but it's aimed for therapists. But for therapists, there are like a ton of resources. And the other thing I wanted to say is like, we're going to have a conference in New York City, April 4th to 6th. Come join us.
Okay. I mean, I might. I definitely hope that everyone's listening should too. We can link to that in the show notes. But yeah.
Awesome.
I'm here. I live in New York, so I got to come.
In It Together. Mm-hmm. You know, the science and practice of healing in connection. Okay. That's the title of our conference.
Amazing. And that's in New York. And I'm actually aware of this conference. So it's hybrid, right? So it's virtual and in person. So anybody listening who is a clinician and wants to learn more about your work can go, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is in person and online. Yeah, it is hybrid.
And I know you were saying that your website is, resources that are aimed for clinicians. Is there if someone is listening and I really want to find a therapist that's trained in this modality, can they find that on the website as well?
There's a therapist directory.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I didn't give the URL for the website. It's aedpinstitute.org. AEDP Institute, one word.
Okay.
www.aedpinstitute.org. And yes, there's absolutely a therapist directory organized by area, geographic area.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It was so lovely talking to both of you. I'm very excited for your book. And yeah, I hope to stay in touch.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. It's really wonderful to be here.
Yeah, this was fun and very lively. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having us.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed listening to this conversation, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts and your feedback with me by scrolling down to the ratings and review section on your Apple Podcast app or whatever app you're listening on. And let me know what you think of this episode or the show in general. Your support means the absolute world to me. And just a simple tap of 5 stars can make a real impact in how this show gets reached by parents everywhere. So thank you so much for listening, and don't be a stranger.